You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk about the finance provisions in this budget, and not just the tax structure that we're setting up, which I'll say again is going to be driving us to a fiscal cliff. Again, we just heard we're cutting $836 million in reductions from our general fund, but also the capacity that this budget and our method of financing it are placing constraints on the ability of this body and our government to really be able to solve the problems we're dealing with right now. We have so many exceptional things going on for North Carolina right now. But if history has taught us anything, it's that these are the times that we need to start discussing the tough questions and the tough problems and making plans to adapt so that we remain in the great position that we're in. Again, ask Sears, ask Blockbuster. What happens? Being on the top of your game today means absolutely nothing for tomorrow if you can't adapt and you don't look forward at what's coming down the pipe. And so not only does this budget fail to live up to that task, this entire process has shown that we may not even be capable of having the conversations about the problems that we're facing. You know, North Carolina is growing rapid, and we are the #1 state for business again. Our urban, suburban areas seem to be thriving on the surface, but under the surface, the cracks are showing. And make no mistake that under any metric, our rural areas are vastly struggling. And again, look to the data we've talked about already. Look at these unemployment rates. Unemployment rates have fallen in the past 10 years. And so we are in a good position that we should be able to be tackling these problems. We are able to be tackling these problems, but we're willfully choosing not to tackle them so that we can do other things, other priorities, like cut taxes. In a time when our public sector is in a hiring crisis, 1 out of every 4 state employee jobs remained unfilled. Schools are struggling to find anyone to put in the classroom. And let me remind you, they are the ones who teach our children and who prepare them for the next generation. And let me remind you again that they are the largest employer in 51 of our counties that we're undercutting and we're not investing. And at a time when it seems like a quarter of our state at any given moment is waiting in line at the DMV on our watch. So what's our solution? Same things it's always been, to cut taxes. Cut taxes in a time when our finances are flashing bright red warning lights to anyone who is willing to look below the surface. We have less revenue in real terms than we had last year. We had about 1.7% more revenue than last year, in a year where we had 6 to 7% inflation. So we can't even afford the actual things that we bought in the last budget with this budget. Again, we start this budget with about $4.8 billion in unreserved balance. We end the biennium with $221 million. So we are spending $4 billion, more than $4 billion, than we're bringing in this year. And we're choosing to cut taxes. And again, we're taking about $4.6 billion of that 4.8 and we're shoving that into SCIF, which I'll talk about that in a second. And for the first time, we actually had a downward revision in our revenue from February to May, when we've been used to billion-dollar upward revisions. And that would be fine. It would be one thing if we were fulfilling all the problems that were in our state, but we're not even close. We're not even close to giving raises that keep up with inflation. We don't have a fully staffed government. We don't have infrastructure projects that are fully funded. And we do not have a sustainable DOT funding system. We don't have state-of-the-art classrooms to be ready to prepare our next generation. In my first term, about 5 years ago, I stood in this chamber where we talked about our SCIF funding scheme and how we were setting ourselves up for trouble. Well, here we are. 5 years ago, we had $15 billion in debt capacity. $15 billion. That's about half of everything we're spending this year. And that means that that was the amount of money we could have financed properly without raising a dime of taxes. And we could have transformed our entire state. And I'm not even remotely considering we should even come close to spending that much money, but we could have. We had that capacity. But what did we do with it? Nothing. We paid cash for absolutely everything. Cash that could have gone to our state employees to give them raises. Cash that could have gone to our teachers. But we didn't. And that would have made our problem today so much easier. And again, when you look back, when we had the lowest interest rates in history 5 years ago and the highest credit rating, had we been forward-looking, as I suggested, as my colleagues have suggested, not only would be able to transform what our state looks like today, we would be paying back pennies on the dollar. Because now as interest rates are rising and inflation are rising, it's even more expensive to do that. And so we don't have those opportunities anymore. We squander them away. Because instead of choosing what was best for our state, we chose what was the cheapest for our government. And just like everything else, you get exactly what you pay for. And some things are expensive, like having a well-functioning government, having qualified, smart, capable state employees who devote their lives and careers to the people of North Carolina. So we're still in a salary crisis. We're in an infrastructure crisis, and now things are more expensive. On Facebook the other day, one of my local news stations put the question, what advice would you give to people moving to North Carolina? You know what the overall response was? Don't. We're full. Things are too expensive. We don't want you here. And you know, net in-migration has always been an issue with existing residents, but what makes this a problem is that our entire economic agenda, our entire economic growth agenda is based on companies coming here, people coming here, instead of us home-growing that talent. We can spend billions in subsidies and incentives to attract the next CEO to come here, or we can grow them right in our classrooms. We can give them the tools. And you know what? If you grow them here, you don't need to bribe them to stay, because it's home. It's our home. They want to stay. But we're neglecting the investments in our people and our community, and that makes the strategies that we're based on now simply unsustainable. And it's making our local governments resistant to people moving in. Again, probably talk to any of your city councils or your town councilors or your county commissions. They are fighting every single new development because the counties don't want to invest in sewer and water. Residents don't want traffic to get worse because we in this body are failing to make the investments needed so that our quality of lives do not suffer from other people coming in. Because that is what we have to do. You're either growing or you're dying. And if we don't provide the resources necessary for us to continue to grow, then the prospects of us to continue to grow is simply going to disappear. And aside from that, we have an even bigger economic geography problem in that the parts of our state that are thriving, there are way too many parts of our state that are being left behind. You want to talk about the best state for business? Ask the people in Canton what the best state for business has given them. Ask the people in Taylorsville what the best state for business has given them. What's VinFast going to do for them? What's Wolfspeed going to do for them? What's Toyota going to do for them? What are we going to do for them? Because if we do not have that shared prosperity, then everyone being left behind, they will see no interest in helping out the parts of our state that are thriving. Because we are a symbiotic relationship. What happens to one of us is eventually going to happen to the other part. And so what does this budget do? It pits ourselves against each other. A project here, a project there, creating this system of phantom scarcity in one of the most prosperous states in the nation. We even talked about giving some counties subsidies so they can compete with other counties for teachers. And who gets to decide who wins and loses? We do, not the people. We get to choose whose hard-earned money gets invested in which communities. And while others are just out of luck because they happen to have different views on the government or politics. But I'll tell you what lifts up every single county and every single community: education. I'll tell you what forms the backbone of every single town and city in this state: our state employees, who do devote their lives and their careers to making sure that our government is a force for good. And that when nothing else is going right in your life or in your community, you can rest assured that your neighbors have your back, that your state has your back. That's the promise we should be living up to. And so I'm going to end with this. Prosperity is not a zero-sum game. Opportunity is not a zero-sum game. This budget fails to live up to the moment we're in. This budget fails to live up to our values. And this budget fails to do what could and should be done to ensure that everybody has the opportunity to succeed in North Carolina. And so I urge you to vote against it.